Hey there, welcome to the stream at home edition. I'm Josh Rushing, sitting in for Vimeo today. If you're watching this on YouTube, I could really use your help. See that box over there? That's a live YouTube chat, and we actually have a stream producer, a little producer who's in that box looking to get your questions and your comments to me so I can get them to our guests during the show. So help me out, won't you? Today we're talking about something that I knew little about before it was pitched. It's called swatting. It's a kind of prank where someone calls and says that there's like a hostage situation at a house that they're not at, so that the police will respond with SWAT to that house. It started with gamers on sites like Twitch, and in fact, check out this video. You can watch one actually happen here.
They skipped up on HUD, Jeff. I think that's why you...
I did.
Oh.
No, what? I don't understand why we didn't just... Okay.
One Raptor diff.
Going mini? Where's the bum?
I'm holding mini peek. Bomb's down by T-Red.
Daps is a ramp player and Lex plays
He's
what?
locker, he's locker.
In that particular video, that young man and his father were handcuffed outside the house while the police went through the house. And what started as fun and games has actually turned deadly when a man in California called the police in Kansas to say there was a hostage situation. And when the police showed up, they shot a 28-year-old man dead on his front porch who had nothing to do with it. It wasn't even the right address for the gamer that they were trying to prank. And in fact, that person who made that call was sentenced to 20 years in jail last year in California. Now, to talk about this today, we're joined by an exciting panel of guests who I'm actually going to ask to introduce themselves to you themselves. So we'll begin with Melina.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me. My name is Melina Abdullah. I'm a professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA. I'm also co-founder of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles and one of the original members of Black Lives Matter. And I'm a single mom of 3 kids who was recently swatted about a month ago. And I'm happy to talk more about that and what that meant for me and for my children.
Wow. Thank you for being with us today, Melina. We're going to get into your story in just a minute and what a story it is. We're also joined by Lolita from Dallas.
Hi, I'm Lolita BucknerInnis. I am a professor of law and senior associate dean at SMU Dedman School of Law in Dallas. Much of my research is in critical race theory, and most recently, I have taken up the topic of swatting and also something that's been described as white-collar crime, that is to say, where Black people become the victims of false police calls.
Oh, and we're joined by Naveed in Seattle.
Hey, Josh. Nadeen Jamali. I'm a editor at large at Newsweek, but I'm also a fellow for the Anti-Defamation League looking at swatting, as well as the co-chair of Seattle Police Department's efforts to combat swatting. And sadly enough, I too am also a victim of, swatting.
Wow. So let's begin with Melina. We have a video I'm going to show of when the police showed up to your house.
I feel shaken. I don't even know how to think. I can't sleep at night because of this. It has made me really paranoid. I'm always checking my room and making sure everything is okay before I go to sleep. I was looking forward to, making friends and having a good time on the cheer team, but since this has happened, it's made it really, really, really hard. So I'm just like,
okay,
I said,
so
I'm taking it one day.
That was actually not the right video, Melina. I'm going to tell you who that was. That is Kristen Evans, and she's a student at Stephen F. Austin University in Nacogdoches, Texas, and she was recently swatted as well. We're going to hear more about this case in just a minute, but can we roll to Melina's video at this moment?
Yes.
Is any danger?
No.
Okay, we got a call to this location that there's a male in there holding you guys hostage, and he wants $1 million or he's going to kill you within an hour.
Oh my, no. There's nobody in the house except my own security.
Because of that. We just want to make sure that you're okay.
I'm fine.
Okay.
My kids are petrified.
My kids. And I understand that. but that's why we're here.
They must have the wrong address.
Melina, can you walk us through what happened on that day?
Sure. So that's just the remainder of the video that was up. Basically, what happened, 9 o'clock in the morning, on a weekday morning, I'm getting ready to go to a press conference, actually, about some work that was happening at school. And I travel with security anyway because of the work that I do with Black Lives Matter and ongoing threats. And my security person arrived at my home. We were getting ready to leave, and he notes that when he rolled up, that the police had my house surrounded. And I said, "Oh, well, it's not for me. I didn't think it was for us because, you know, there's incidents that happen. I live off of Crenshaw in Los Angeles. It's a very active community. Sometimes things happen in my neighborhood." And I looked out the window, and police come to the window. There's police everywhere. They come to the window and point assault rifles towards me through the window. And then I realized it was for us. And so I immediately tried to get my children in the safest place possible towards the back of the house. I go live, this is a clip, I think, from my Instagram live. But there's an announcement over the loudspeaker that the police have my house surrounded. There's a helicopter overhead. This is just a small number of the police that were around. There were about 30 or 40 officers, all armed very heavily, who announced that everyone in the house needed to come out with our hands up. Of course, since I was live streaming, I announced that I had my phone in my hand. I kept thinking about Corinne Gaines and Stephon Clark, who'd been murdered for having their phones in their hands while Black. And gratefully, thankfully, my neighbors are who protected me. My neighbors refused to allow me to walk towards the police without them, and literally put their bodies on the line for me. But it was a horrific incident. It was something that we're grateful to have survived, and still deeply traumatizes my children.
Can you walk me through what were you feeling? Why did you imagine they were there?
I didn't know why they were there. You know, I know that I'm a constant target. I'm a pretty well-known police abolitionist. I work on reimagining public safety. I organize with Black Lives Matter, which is why I think that a piece around swatting, also the political swatting of organizers, is a lot different than, you know, swatting as a prank, right? That the caller who called on me had sounded like a white Southerner male and was very clear about he was targeting Black Lives Matter. And I believe that the police are complicit when they think that something, you know, when they get calls like that. It's not that they're going in blind. They knew precisely who I was, and they knew precisely why this call was coming in. And to move in that way, I believe they were complicit in what could have, you know, brought my death and the death of my children.
How should the police have handled that?
I think that it's easy enough to, you know, get in touch with me. They've gotten in touch with me in many other instances. It would have been easy enough for them to make a phone call. It would have been easy enough. They clearly didn't believe the call, because if you look at the calmness, once I was terrorized and asked to come out with my hands up, once I had assault rifles pointed at me, they did nothing more to ensure my safety or the safety of my children. So they were complicit in this call, in my view. They could have, if they were really concerned about my safety, there were other ways to check on my safety, and they didn't do that.
Naveed, does this sound familiar to your experience?
Well, yeah, I actually had a chance to talk to Chief Moore about Melina's case when we did a panel at IACP. But look, the point that I want to hit on here is both of you have described swatting as a hoax. It is not a hoax. It is, in fact, a crime. And as you heard from Melina, it actually, beyond the legal realm, it also has it's an act of terror, right? Goal here is to terrorize. It's not just a physical act. It's to spread fear. And as Melina is saying, it's not just a tool that's being targeted at gamers. We're seeing it used at disenfranchised. Look, we're seeing black activists being targeted by this. But we're also seeing the CEO of Instagram, right? So this is a tool that can be used by anyone, really, to go and reach out and try to get this kinetic thing. So it's not just a hoax and that someone's calling it a threat. The goal here is to play on inherent biases, as Melina is pointing out, to try to elicit an incredibly strong armed police response with the goal of inflicting violence. So that's incredibly dangerous. But here's the other part of this, Josh. There's no consequence. So people can do this, and what Seattle and what we're working on is really to help police departments identify and tailor their response. But when it comes to investigation, let alone prosecutions, it just doesn't happen. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So right now, if you want to SWAT someone, unfortunately, the chances of you being arrested, let alone prosecuted and convicted, are damn near zero. So that's a chilling thing when you realize the damage and consequences it can have on individuals and groups.
Lolita, we're joined by a lawyer, legal expert on this. Lolita, how could this be legal?
Wow. I absolutely agree with what's just been said. First of all, this is not a hoax. People who engage in swatting are very purposeful. This is an act of terror. One of the significant problems is that perhaps one of the most significant safety mechanisms that have been created in the U.S. over the last few decades is the widespread access of the 911 system. That is one of the tools that we use in order to keep ourselves safe. And that's true whether or not we fear violent crime or whether we have, for example, a medical emergency. It is shocking and regrettable that the 911 system is being deployed in this way. But let me also just add, it's not just calls to 911 that are being used. Very often, swatting also occurs via calls to non-emergency police numbers. The reason that this can be so insidious and so difficult to control is that, frankly, outside of the sort of pure hoax calls where someone is calling up on a gamer or where someone has a beef with someone, very often callers can make the claim, the very much subjectivized claim, that they were fearful or that they somehow thought this was going on. It is very hard to challenge someone's subjective or subjectivized claim about something they thought was going on. It's very difficult, number one. Number two, even though I would say in the vast majority of U.S. jurisdictions, it is a violation, it's a criminal violation to make a false report, many of those mechanisms for criminalizing that act, they are low level, they are misdemeanors, they are not felonies. You spoke of the case in California where someone was just convicted and got 20 years in jail. That's because someone ended up dead, number one. Number two, it was also possible to harness the power of homicide statutes. I think that was prosecuted as an involuntary manslaughter case. Those people who do criminal law recognize that, and it's really difficult to make out many manslaughter cases. I mean, you need a certain amount of intentionality, and that was present in that case, and you still end up not with murder, but with, I believe, a manslaughter charge. So that case is actually exemplary of how even in the worst case scenarios, it becomes difficult to prosecute. Or if it is possible to prosecute, it's difficult to get a felony prosecution. And if you can get a felony prosecution, it's often difficult to get the highest level of penalty. There are, I understand, some jurisdictions that are trying to put in place some explicit statutory responses to this, but that's been slow going so far. And I would guess, and my co-guest can jump in here, I would guess that's because we don't want to have a chilling effect on people's ability to call 911. How do you balance that with a very real fact that people are using this as a weapon against others?
Yeah,
I think though it's also, if it's possible, I think though we also need to think about that the police are not neutral in all of these cases. So this is used when we talk about the targeting of Black activists and organizers. This is used, I think, as an excuse for them to come in and terrorize. It's not that the police can't, if you even watch just that short clip of the video in my case, the police can't claim. He claimed he didn't know who I was. Now, no police officer in all of LAPD doesn't know who I am and doesn't know who Black Lives Matter is. We are the largest and most active chapter in Black Lives Matter, and this is happening at the time when Black Lives Matter is now the largest movement in global history. Come on now, you didn't come in and come to my house and not know what it was. And so it's really important that we, one, absolutely say that it's more than a hoax. So the caller absolutely has some responsibility, but police departments who are using it as an excuse to further terrorize, harass, and really place in jeopardy the lives of activists, also bear some responsibility. And I think that we need to remember that law enforcement units are not neutral. They have their own agendas that they're trying to advance.
Naveed, you're going to jump in there.
I was going to say, so to that point, look, clearly I've listened to many, many swatting calls, and, again, people who are calling it a SWAT, they want to get a police response. So they're going to play an inherent bias, and clearly race is part of that. But, you can't ignore the fact that, like I said, the CEO of Instagram has been swatted. In my case, it was actually the former head of DHS, Christina, that was actually swatted, and that's what actually brought a federal beef. But here's the larger point. You go to a police department and you ask them, they don't even know what the hell swatting means. They don't even know. Most police officers don't know that's a thing. So that's one problem. And then, to my co-host point about the legal part of this, to Melina, she was terrorized. This was awful. It's clearly had an impact on her in a lot of ways. But, you go to a police officer and you say, how do you record this? They don't even have a crime to record this at because there's no physical damage. There's no loss of life. So in many cases, they'll just record it as a false 911 call, which at best is it's not a felony. It's a misdemeanor. So there's no investigative purposes. I'm sure the FBI has not been in contact with Melina. And I can tell you from experience that these people who are swatting someone like her are doing this prolifically. They're not just targeting her. They're targeting all sorts of people. But the biggest challenge here is getting the feds to investigate it, because what we found from swatters is not only are they out of state, as again was pointed out, they're calling the non-emergency line, which you can't call 911 in Austin unless you're in Austin, for example. They're not only out of state, in some cases, they're out of the country. So we need federal involvement to investigate and prosecute. But on the law enforcement side, Melina's absolutely right. Like, police should know that this is a thing. They should know that there are people who are actively trying to play on their inherent biases, right? So they know if they say it's a black man with a gun, it's more likely going to get a stronger response. And they're playing on that. There's no doubt about it. But again, I just want to make clear that this is not just like I would say, this is not a tool just used in the gamer community. It's not just a tool used against activists, although that is a part of it. It's also used against, like, Trump administration officials and, CEOs of large companies. And that's why, unfortunately, it's finally getting some attention. Heck, I've even spoken to the Department of Defense about this, and we've talked about nation states using this as a tool to disrupt a military base, which you can absolutely do. So this has a broader concern. It's viewed as an emerging threat. And again, the absolutely frightening thing here is, no matter which way you look at it, whether it's someone who went after Melina or it's someone who went after the former head of DHS, in many cases, there's zero consequences. And so, what's to discourage people to do this? They know that they can do it with impunity. And they only have to be right once, and that's it. You've ruined someone's life.
And it's not even the loss of life, which of course there's that risk, and that's horrible. It's the trauma forevermore. I've heard everyone here call it terror, and that's the whole point of terrorism, right?
Yes.
And so it just happened to a black college student at Stephen F. Austin down in Texas. And can we play this video? Her name's Kristen Evans. The police stormed into her room at 3 a.m. in the morning. And here's the trauma from this happening.
I feel shaken. I don't even know how to think. I can't sleep at night because of this. It has made me really paranoid. I'm always checking my room and making sure everything is okay before I go to sleep. I was looking forward to, making friends and having a good time on the cheer team. But since this has happened, it's made it really, really, really hard. So I'm just, like I said, I'm taking it one day at a time.
Melina, can you touch
Awful.
on the emotional trauma that lasts long after the actual event?
Sure. I mean, what shook me most is that my 3 children were home. And after asking the sergeant if I was free to go, I walked back to my home and watched as my 13-year-old daughter just shook in utter terror. She, as I walked out the house, when I was, they called for everyone to walk out the house with their hands up. I was trying to draw the police away from the house so my children wouldn't have to face guns pointed at them actually. And, thankfully, the police trained their guns on me and not on my children, because they were kind of barricaded in a back room and I was able to draw them away from the house. But thinking about what it meant for my children to watch as these assault rifles, and this is dozens of officers surrounding their mother with assault rifles. This is something that's going to live with them and with me for the rest of our lives. And, definitely, there's therapy that's in place as a result. There's a lot of anxiety, and Black folks already have to live with anxiety when we see police, but the way in which we were threatened causes additional anxiety. I watch how my children behave when the police are around, and it's almost unavoidable these days. It's not like I can keep them safe from police, but it's definitely taking an emotional toll on us.
I want to bring in Stuart Chang. He's in our community. He sent us this video comment. Can we play that real quick?
In the most recent example of swatting, where campus police raided the dorm room of a Black cheerleader at Stephen F. Austin University, the police chief made the assurance that the incident was not racially motivated. Even if it may not have been in that instance, there's a long history where race plays a major factor in false calls to the police. A lot of times, callers know that the police will more likely respond, and respond urgently, when they include race in a false report. Amy Cooper knew this when she called the police claiming that a Black man was threatening her life. In a little known fact about a more famous case, Lawrence versus Texas, it all started with a false report about a Black man going crazy with a firearm in an apartment. In the Lawrence case, this led to a bad arrest based off of a bad law. But this is not always the case, and an encounter with the police can easily turn out deadly, as in the cases of Tamir Rice and Breonna Taylor.
This happens more than 1,000 times a year at this pace in the U.S. right now. A lot of people in our YouTube community are asking, what should be done about it? What can we do about it? Lolita, from a legal perspective, do we need some new laws here?
We absolutely need some new laws here. As I mentioned a few moments ago, right now, in most jurisdictions, there is very little on the law books in state statutes that would directly respond to this, except for those various statutes that criminalize false reports to the police or to 911. But I think beyond law, I think we have to come at this from a couple of angles, and this goes back to something that Melina said. I think that even if we had a law on the book, there could still be people who, let's say, somehow honestly but incorrectly believe that someone at her home is holding them hostage. Let's say that that were true, and let's say that it was just completely wrong. One of the big issues is the heavily militarized response of a number of our law enforcement members. We probably, along with creating some laws that would criminalize false reports, we also need to create mechanisms so that our law enforcement community responds to these sorts of potential perils without going in as if they are going to war. I mean, it is not for nothing that this has been called swatting. That refers to SWAT, Special Weapons and Tactics. Those of us who have read about it, remember the 80s, recall that this was the era of big militarized policing, And that's often the kind of response that we get. So yes, I do think we need some more laws in the book. We need local laws, that is to say at the city level. We need state level laws that could be widely used in criminal courts of jurisdictions, but also, and I think Naveed mentioned this should be also federalized. Very often these callers are contacting people or contacting the police
Hey, Lolita.
across state lines.
I'm going to have to
Yes.
wrap it up
Yeah.
there. Here's what we
Okay.
need to leave viewers with. This is not a hoax. This is terrorism. This is dangerous. And it sounds like we need some new laws to catch up with it. I want to thank all my guests for joining me today. That's it for me this week. Next time you'll see Femi okay back in her chair. So thanks for joining us this week on the stream, and see you soon.